Ladies and gentlemen, something doesn't seem right. I know we're just coming out of spooky season, so no one would blame you for feeling a bit on edge in general. But as far as Liverpool were concerned, just a few short days ago, Halloween was nowhere near their biggest worry. 2 seasons ago, Liverpool had a rare, uncharacteristically bad season. Back then, COVID, global turmoil, and injuries were widespread across all sports and non-sporting activities alike, so they get a pass for that. Fast forward to today, and unfortunately, there is still a pandemic. Only difference is that Liverpool have managed to contain it pretty well within their own club grounds. After 12 games played, they sit in 9th place with only 4 games won. And apart from a 9-0 massacre of Bournemouth, they've all been narrow victories. Also, Bournemouth are only 3 points off from them at the time of making this video. So, what's the deal? How has this team, which was once the only thing that was preventing Manchester City from turning the Premier League into a perpetual one-horse race, fallen so far? Today, we look at how bad things are and attempt to provide a few reasons that answer all those questions and more. So, with that being said, what on earth is going on at Liverpool? Yo, what's going on, guys? Hope you're all doing well. I'm Tinashe and welcome back to another Football Iconic video. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, that'd be great. In the off-season, prior to the 22-23 season, I made a video where I essentially spent about 24 minutes just heaping praise on Jurgen Klopp for everything he's done over at Anfield. A week after that, I made a video about Darwin Núñez where I essentially said that he could be a very, very good signing for Liverpool and a terrible omen for the rest of the league. It's safe to say that at this moment in time, both of those videos aged like this. Before we get into the real meat and details of this video, I want to take a second to briefly go over the stats that Liverpool have put up since the start of the season while making a few observations. But before we get into that, who is calling me? You know I'm recording right now. Hello? It's the sponsor of this video. The World Cup is almost upon us, ladies and gentlemen. Time to say hello once more to fan parks, dreadful predictions, and worst of all, dudes asking you what the score is when you can see that they are literally holding a smartphone in their hand. It's all frustrating, I know. Speaking from personal experience, of course. But instead of getting upset, why not tell them to go ahead and download OneFootball, the sponsor of today's video? And I can already hear it. You're asking yourself, why would I go ahead and do that? Because OneFootball is your go-to football news app for all things news, transfers, scores, and highlights. Once in the app, you can choose a team, group, or player and get all the stats and updates you could ever want. And all that comes at the low price of $0. That's zero in any denomination of currency that you're choosing. It's the same price. If all that sounds good to you, why not go ahead and click the link in the description to download OneFootball for free today. Thanks so much to OneFootball for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it. Right now, Liverpool are closer to the relegation spots than they are to the top 4 spots. Over the course of all of last season, they dropped only 22 points. At the moment, just over a quarter of the way through this one, they've already dropped 20 points. Going into their most recent match versus Leeds at the weekend, Liverpool had not lost at Anfield since the 7th of March, 2021. That's about 29 league games. Thanks to a late winner, that record is no more. They've conceded first in 8 of their 12 Premier League games thus far, and like I said, in the games that they haven't and have gone on to win, they've not been all too convincing. At a glance, what I've just said may not hold up for many people. And of course, that's because, as Liverpool have done for many years, possession is the key to their game. For example, in their game versus Leeds, they had 69% possession, completing more than double the number of passes that their opponents did. They had 75% possession against Nottingham Forest a week before that. But it's what they do with that possession that has been heavily called into question recently. Liverpool have always been a team that's created a lot of chances. Likewise, they've also always been a team that's missed a lot of chances. Using last season as a base point, at this point of the year, they had averaged a team-wide conversion rate of 15% from 234 shots after 12 games played. This year, at the same junction, they are hitting an average of about 11% with 212 shots made. Now, a difference of 4% may not sound significant, but when you realize that they scored 12 more goals by this point last year, it becomes significant. Now, this is obviously a hypothetical, but distributed over their 12 games so far this season, that is easily enough to have turned all that red and yellow into green. And just because I haven't mentioned it yet, based on form, both Leeds and Forest are and will likely continue to fight relegation for the remainder of the season. Those 3 points were very rare for them indeed. So that's a snapshot of the attack. but perhaps the most significant drop-off has come from both the center and the back. I can't lie, for a team that takes a lot of pride in the fact that they've outrun their opposition for many years at this point, a midfield selection of Thiago, Fabinho, James Milner, Jordan Henderson, and Harvey Elliott doesn't exactly scream dynamic, especially when Harvey Elliott is the only one amongst them that is under 29. Speaking of which, perhaps this match made James Milner wish he could go back to his younger days. You know, before Harvey Elliott was born? Perhaps not. Being outrun by 11 kilometers as a team is a shocking stat for Liverpool, and I'd put the lion's share of that down to the midfield. They were second best at pretty much everything. And then we have the defense. Virgil van Dijk's being found out with extreme prejudice at the moment, doing his best statue impersonation in several games thus far and being memed relentlessly for it. And I guess if you don't want to believe it, perhaps you'll be convinced upon hearing that the streak is over. Yep, for the first time in 70 league games, Virgil van Dijk has lost at Anfield. If the alarm bells weren't ringing to many Pool supporters, I imagine they are now. And speaking of impressions, I must say, Gomez did a really good Bobby Firmino impression at the weekend with a no-look pass, although I have some notes. It might have been a bit too early in the game, it also might have been at the wrong side of the pitch, it also probably should have been to one of his own teammates. Anyway, I think we're all on the same page. Things aren't going too well over at Liverpool Football Club, which begs the question, what in the world is going on? It's hard to imagine that the team I watched only a few short days ago was heavily in contention for the quadruple up until the very end of last season. Some people have scapegoated Trent Alexander-Arnold for his poor defensive showings. Some have blamed Klopp for cycling through formations almost weekly at this point. In case it isn't glaringly obvious to you by now, the problems are aplenty. It's all of the above and more. So let's start with an obvious one. Injuries. As is understandably the case if you're a team that employs a heavy counterpress, injuries are more than inevitable. So I was reading an interesting article by The Athletic, linked below, that spoke about the rigorous training that Liverpool players undergo before and during the season. In short, for matches and training combined, players will run about 70 kilometers per week during preseason. This will then drop to about 55 kilometers per week when the regular season begins. That 55 accounts for about 2 games per week and training. And that 55 kilometers per player is estimated to be well above the average for EPL players at other clubs, which, come to think of it, only makes sense if you've been watching these guys play over the past almost decade. Fast forward to today, and if you combine the fact that the spine of the squad is aging, with the lackluster movement in the transfer market, and the injuries become quite devastating. To be fair, the club has attempted to mitigate these problems by signing younger players in the past. The only problem is that the selection of these players hasn't been all too inspiring, in that a lot of them are really good players, but they're coming into the squad with already existing injury-prone records. Oxlade-Chamberlain, Naby Keita, Thiago, not a youngster, but I'm sure you know why I've included him in this list, and also Darwin Núñez, which is possibly a future worry. And in case anyone forgot, which I'll admit, I did, Liverpool signed a very injury-prone Arthur as midfield backup from Juventus on loan in September. The man has yet to make a Premier League appearance because he is injured. Look, these are only a handful of players, and I don't want to put too much blame on any of them individually, as they all came in under their own context. But it is worth noting. So bad luck and transfers and injuries have definitely played a role in all of this, I'd say. Now that we've spoken about some of the incoming issues, I want to briefly laser in and focus on 2 of the outgoing ones, Sadio Mane and Jorginho Wijnaldum. The loss of these 2 really can't be understated in my eyes. When it comes to Mane, you just can't really replace a guy like that, can you? First of all, because he's world class, second place in the Ballon d'Or for a reason. Secondly, because he was very, very reliable. Out of a possible 152 EPL games since 2018, he played 140 of them. And thirdly, because his departure from Liverpool forced a structural change that is nowhere near as potent as it once was. I imagine Luis Diaz was brought in to ultimately replace him, which he still might do, you know, but for the time being, the killer trident of the 4-3-3 is no longer viable. Also, Luis Diaz is injured right now. Instead, in recent weeks, we've seen a 2-man front line, usually Salah and Núñez, a change which probably does a lot to explain why Salah has dipped in form too. Unfamiliar territory, you know. I still have faith that Nunez will come right, if I'm being completely honest. He gets into good positions and he's definitely not lacking in enthusiasm, but things haven't clicked just yet. On to Wijnaldum, and I honestly don't think I need to explain this one all too much. The destroyer that did a lot of the dirty work for his team with a smile on his face, plugged every hole on the pitch and only missed 11 EPL games in 5 seasons at Liverpool. You've probably sensed a bit of a trend amongst these two players that I've singled out. Also, Wijnaldum has yet to be replaced. So what about Klopp? Out of all the issues I've mentioned thus far, you'd imagine that it's his job to notice them before they happen and set the ship in the correct direction, right? Probably yes, but also no. I mean, it's not for lack of trying, I guess. Liverpool were in for quite a few midfielders in the summer. Tchouaméni, of course. Bellingham, we heard. Those didn't pan out for one reason or another, and neither did their other targets, I guess. So they were forced to bring in Arthur instead as backup, and probably could have done a better job of that in terms of recruitment, perhaps. A lot of people have pointed to the fact that FSG spending has been lackluster, and you know what? For a team like Liverpool that is trying to reach the heights that they're trying to reach, where their biggest rivals over the past 4 years or so have been Real Madrid and Manchester City, yeah, their spending has been lackluster. I mean, listen, if Jack Grealish is worth 100 M's, I'm pretty sure Borussia Dortmund are well within their rights to demand that much, reportedly, for Jude Bellingham, especially considering the fact that he could very well have a fantastic World Cup. And if that happens, in addition to the 100 M's, Dortmund could conceivably ask for the rights to Jurgen Klopp's firstborn. And honestly, that might not even be enough at that point. Unfortunately, in this day and age, it kinda is pay to win, so you gotta pay up. But to cut them some slack, if my memory serves correctly, I'm pretty sure that all of Liverpool's midfielders were fit at the beginning of the season. So in the short term, I can understand why movements weren't swift. On the field, I'd say Klopp has been proactive. I made the joke about the formation changes, but at least he's trying to see what works. And ironically, the best I think I've seen of Liverpool from a team perspective all season was when they decided to become a fully counter-attacking team against Man City a few weeks ago. Death, taxes, and Salah scoring against City. Things that we can never avoid. Moving along, unfortunately, Klopp's team just keeps getting found out, and he ultimately has to take a lot of the blame for it. He's been given far more grace than I think the vast majority of managers would be given if they were in his position and had produced the results that he has produced, and I think I chalk that down to the fact that he's probably the best thing that's happened to Liverpool since 1990. So for the same reasons, I don't see him getting the sack anytime soon, nor is it warranted just yet. There are obviously other factors worth mentioning that have possibly contributed to Liverpool's misery, such as Michael Edwards leaving his post as sporting director in the summer, people's grievances with spending on training facilities and club structures instead of players, and then, of course, the biggest of all, and the reason I personally think things have gone sideways, the departure of Divock Gotriki. How deep will the decline go? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me believes that this is all just a blip and things will get better in the future. But that is also the same part of me that believed that the turning point was the Man City match a few weeks ago. It wasn't. I'll tell you one thing though. I'm sure the World Cup break cannot come quick enough for all those over at Liverpool. And there we have it. What on earth do you guys think is going on over at Liverpool? Feel free to let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to follow me on all the socials if you haven't. That is all from me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.